I don't know whether to say I'll quit at 5 till or I'll try to make it till 5 till. But we'll try to get in that neighborhood. Yeah, my name is Joe Mintz, and I'm maybe one of the most grateful recovering alcoholics that I know anything about.
Hey, Joe.
My date of sobriety is the 15th of March, 1980, and I was suffering at that time. It sure was. I was suffering so much that I wanted some relief so bad I didn't know what to do. I look at my drinking experience as kind of a compact period of time. I went until I was probably about 34 without drinking. Or when I did, it was a special occasion, my anniversary or something like that. But I was a member of a church that did not believe in drinking. And I don't know that I really believe that much that drinking was wrong if done, in moderation and under control and everything. But my church did. So if I drank at all, I felt guilty about it. And I guess that was the first phase. It was secret drinking. My wife knew about it, but nobody else did. And like I say, it was just very seldom. But in 1969, something happened that gave me a real reason to drink, and I mean this in the sense that it wasn't necessarily a reason. I was drinking because I was alcoholic, but alcoholics want a reason, and so if we can find a reason, we hang on to it real big. And my father became a missing person in 1969, and I was pretty much well convinced that he'd been a murder victim, and I was convinced that I knew who killed him. Then I'd put it all together, and he was getting away with murder. And I'll make a short story out of it. 6 years later, he was found guilty of it. He had pleaded guilty to it, showed us where he'd buried Daddy's body. But that gave me a real good excuse to drink all I wanted to. And to some extent, there was something to it. I couldn't sleep a lot at night. I went kind of crazy. I became Dick Tracy, trying to trace this thing down and get all the clues. And I was convinced the sheriff was an idiot. And I remember going one night, somebody had called me and told me that a certain person, they were sure he'd killed Daddy. And he had just gotten out of prison, and he'd killed 2 people in knife fights. And I went to his house and demanded. Now, this guy's probably 6'3" or 4. And he could play football on anybody's team. And I'm standing there, my 5'8" figure, and at that time probably weighed 100 and maybe 25 or 30 pounds, and demanding that he tell me the truth or let's go outside and settle it. And when you do things like that, you need to get out of your head somehow or other, and drinking was one of the things that did it for me. So I held on to that excuse. I was just thinking as we came up here tonight, I spoke here probably not this church and maybe not this group, but in probably at the Presbyterian church over there 31 years ago. So I don't get around speaking engagements an awful lot. Pitiful thing of it is my story hadn't got any better, I don't think, than it was then. I did a lot of foolish things. I was laughed at. Stories were told about me, and eventually came back to me. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience or not, but I did. My boss one time, he got this. Well, I worked for the government. The government loves statistics. They love paperwork. They love forms. And he got this request. Wanted to know how many employees he had broken down by sex. And he wrote back to him, he says, I don't have any employees, men or women, broke down by sex. But I've got one fellow working before me who's broken down by alcohol. And there I was. It's kind of thing that went on behind my back. Drinking continued from, I'm placing my real active alcoholism starting about 1969, maybe 70, I'm not sure. And it got to be a daily thing. I mean, I came home, I wouldn't drink at home because my wife would fuss at me if I did. So I drank on the road. I'd stop and buy, at first I'd buy some beer, a couple of beers. And then it got to be these big malt lagers, 2 of those. And my wife asked me to stop, and I knew that she was upset with it and bothered by it and everything. So I cut down from that to about a pint a day. And she still fussed at me, and I cut down to about a fifth a day. And as time went by, I'm not going to do a fifth step here tonight, but I'm going to tell you that my morals really went down. And I did things that I thought I'd never do. I'd always believed that one of my most important things in my life were my children and my wife and my home. And I loved all of them. I really did. And I could see all of those relationships really changing. You know, when I started making amends, I had a son that was in the Coast Guard school up at Williamsburg. Is it Williamsburg? Yorktown. Excuse me. It was at Yorktown, Virginia. And just about every weekend, I would go get him and bring him home, and his wife would carry him back, or vice versa. But I had a lot of time to talk to him, my oldest son. And I tried to make amends while we were talking. Talked it out with him. And he told me something. He said, Daddy, he said, when we were little guys, he said, we thought we had the best daddy in the world. He said, you can make everything fun. He said, you remember going out and cutting wood, splitting firewood and everything. He said, you'd make a game out of it. And it was just fun. You'd take us out in that old car. I had an old car that I just hauled trash in, and take it out now onto log roads. We live in the country, and these were roads through the woods that loggers had used. And he said, you'd let us learn to drive that way. And he just talked about how many things he loved about me and how he loved about the life we lived in. And he said, then somehow you seemed like you got to the place you didn't like us anymore. And I remembered one time I had got up a load of trash. I was going to carry it to the landfill site. And Jeff and Craig both came out. Daddy, can we go with you? No, Daddy's got to meet a man. That's not true. But I was going to drink, and I didn't want them with me. So I said, no, you can't go with me. And when I came back home, I'd been drinking and was not in a very playful mood. And they were playing with somebody else down the road, and I guess it was okay with me. So I went from just really enjoying my 3 children. I had a daughter too. And I went from enjoying them and loving them to complete indifference. And then my wife thought I was neglecting her. And that's because I was. Now, the thing of it is, I got defensive. And I'm not sure that every alcohol does, but I think a significant number of us may do this. This is my story, not yours. But when somebody's critical of you, of me, and I was drinking, I got very defensive. And I argued about it. And I tried to belittle them, make them feel as little as they'd made me feel. And this really is kind of the way my life went. And not only at home. It went that way at work. And I happened to have an occupation that you could get away with a lot. I was an illustrator. And wasn't a particularly good one, or a particularly bad one. I was just an illustrator, and people think that somebody can draw. That's good. That's good. So I got good performance appraisals. And I look back at some of the work I did then during that time, and I shouldn't have got away with it. But I did. And so it went on and on. One night at a farewell, Helen farewell. And see, that was the night a new officer came in, and I introduced myself to him. And the time I remember introducing myself, he said, "I know that." He said, "You've introduced me two times before this, at the same Helen farewell." And it was, I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but it wasn't very long after that they decided to abolish my job. And, well, that was a kind thing to do. They could have wrecked my reputation really bad if they did. But this was a place that had liked me for several years. Thought I was a good employee. And, they said, well, Joe's probably, I think they said this, Joe's a good old fellow. Let's just get him out of here and get him out of our hair and put him in somebody else's hair. Because the civil service had, at that time, you had a right to any job. When your job was abolished, you had a right to any job that you were qualified to do. So guess where I was qualified to go to work? At an intelligence production unit. Requires well, I had a security clearance, but they required top security clearance, which I got with no trouble. And I had to go to work every morning and face an MP and let him identify me and give me a badge. And I could put that badge on and go back and start working. And I learned, at that time, I learned to talk and say my name, sucking air in rather than expelling it. God knows, I was kind of scared then about losing everything, so I was going to try to do the best I could, and for some reason, I can see things. I'm a visual person, and I started working on photographs of a certain part of the world, and I made some points doing that, and the boss thought I was pretty good. So he was planning a training program for me. Had it all laid out. I got partly to an Army school, maybe to a civilian school, pick up some language and stuff, and I was gonna be a big shot in the information business. But one morning, and I don't know why I remember, well, everybody was wearing costumes for some reason. A lot of people were wearing costumes. It was Halloween morning. And I had been drinking the night before. I don't remember that I was drinking any more or any less. I just remember the morning. And I looked across that parking lot, and there was no earthly way that I was going to be able to get out of my car and walk across that parking lot and face an MP and actually be able to work. So I said, well, I'll go back home and I'll just call him and tell him I'm sick and stuff. But I stopped and bought something out of the convenience store. I don't remember what it was, but I know that I went out and sat there all day. Didn't call back in, didn't say anything's wrong, just didn't do anything. Now, at that time, I owned a little bit of cropland that I'd inherited from my father. And I drove out. Nobody saw me all day. I just sat there and drank that stuff. And I was feeling suicidal, really suicidal. And now people actually use dynamite to ditch with. Most of people use drag lines and stuff like that. But I was thinking, you know, I could get some dynamite and I could come out here and start opening. Some of those ditches really needed to be opened up. And I could have this accident. My wife would get double indemnity and everybody would say, poor Joe. He was out there trying to do something with this cropland that his daddy neglected to do anything with for so many years. And he had this accident. What a pitiful sight that would have been. And people would have cried and felt sorry for me. But I didn't do it. But I thought about it. And I thought about it seriously. Because I was beginning to dislike myself. I was making excuses inside. The thing of it is, I began this process of rationalizing everything. I blamed it. See, I had the excuse of Daddy's disappearance. I had the excuse that my wife didn't like me anymore and didn't treat me with the love and respect that I wanted so much. And my kids had grown distance from me. And I've just had all these reasons that I was right and they were wrong. And this drink was the only friend I had. Then I think I went into the last phase of my alcoholism. And that was lasted probably more than a couple of years. But it was significant in the fact that I knew by then that I was an alcoholic. I didn't have to be talked into it. Listen, I have family members. And I lived in a neighborhood where other people, other than family members, were alcoholics. I knew what alcoholism was. I knew what having wrecks was. I knew what losing jobs was. I know what family breakups and family fights was. And I was getting to the pace that I was getting almost there. And I knew that anybody that needed to drink a fifth of alcohol every day of their life, at a minimum, was an alcoholic. And I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I didn't want to be like some of the people I knew. I didn't want to lose my wife. I didn't want to lose my family. So I tried to quit a couple of times. I tried to cut down. But I had no success at it whatsoever. And more, I just thought to myself, this is not what God made me to be. I'm not supposed to be this. I had lived a pretty good life before all this began. Had good reputation at work. I'd been active in a church. In fact, I held a job in church. I'd been a member of JC's and got a Spark Plug Award, which means that you really tried to do something for the club. That was gone. I was a drunk. And I didn't like that. I didn't want to be that anymore. And I tried to quit. And I did quit. It was a wee hours of the morning. I had been drinking to go to sleep. I couldn't go to sleep without it. And I didn't sleep then, I don't think. I think I was just kind of passed out. And when I'd wake up, I'd feel terrible and everything. But it was March 15th, 1980. And made me a tea glass, probably 3/4 full of vodka and the rest water. and I was sitting on the hearth of the fireplace, sipping that. And my wife had some magazines that she'd got together to throw away or something. And I was looking through that, and one got my attention. It was some woman's magazine, ladies' magazine. I don't remember which one. But it talked about, had a subject on it about addictions. And talked about several addictions. Pain medicine, Valium, alcoholism, and everything. And I knew mine was alcoholism, so I read it. And I don't know why this had an impact on me, but it said, alcoholics often think they have to drink to sleep, but it really doesn't give them any rest. And I don't know, that struck me as being important to me right then. I don't know why. But I was just thinking about my whole life and how I felt about myself and how disgusted I was with the life I was leading. And also, by that time, I had lost that job with the intelligence unit, and I had been reassigned to a graphics unit again. And that really soothed me. I mean, I just felt good in the end, and I didn't want to lose that job. And I got down on my knees and I prayed almost the same prayer that's in the big book, although I'd never read it. But I said, you know, if there is a God, please help me. And I made up my mind I was going to try to quit. And so from then on until about 2 o'clock that afternoon, when I'd get to shaking so bad I couldn't stand it, and don't nobody else try this, please, because they tell me it's really dangerous. But I'd put a spoonful of vodka in a tea glass until it stowed up and just sip it. I could kind of stay within my skin if I did that. I did that 2 or 3 times, and probably about 2 o'clock that day I had the last drink of alcohol that I've had to have since then. I went for about a week and didn't drink. And Saturday came. Reasoning really ran out overtime in my head that day. And I said, well, you know, it was easier to quit that week than I thought it would be. So I think I will go up to the ABC store and get a fifth and enjoy the weekend, and then I'll just quit for good Monday. Have one last one, you know. And I got in my car and I drove. I lived about 13 miles from town. I got in my car and I drove to within maybe 2 blocks of the ABC store, and something inside of me, I wasn't hearing voices, don't believe, I'm not that crazy, but something inside of me said, sucker, you better turn around. And I did turn around. And it how awesome never drinking again was. I couldn't bear the thought of it. But I got through that night, and the next afternoon, Sunday afternoon, I called the AA club down in Fayetteville. And the guy that talked to me on the phone said, well, we'd love to talk to you. Are you able to drive? Am I able to drive? I had a drink in a week. I'm sober as you ever going to get. In fact, I was hoping the highway patrolman would stop me. You got any liquor in your car? No, man, have a search. Just look it all over. I got a gold star for you if you ain't got any liquor in there, you know. But the highway patrolman never stopped me. And I got to the AA club, and a wonderful fellow, he's gone now. His name was Brock. And Brock took me upstairs, just he and me, and he told me his story. I didn't know what he was going to say to me. I don't know if he was going to show me a film about drunken wrecks on the highway and people being killed. I don't know. I didn't know what he was going to do. I didn't know if he was going to fuss me out for being an alcoholic. He didn't do that. He told me his story, what it had been like, what happened, and what he was like then. And he told me then I should come back that night and pick up a white chip if I wanted to stay sober. And I did. I wanted to be sober. I mean, I know that some people have to be convinced they're an alcoholic and convinced about how bad life had become. But by that time, life had taught me itself. I wanted it. I wanted to be sober. And I got a big book. They gave me a big book. And the next day, I read that big book. And I read certain passages over and over and over again. And there are three. You know, every one of us probably who's gotten sober with a big book probably has read certain things that were important to that person, to you. These three things stuck with me the next week, and I held on to those things. And one was the first step, or the beginning of what we read is the steps. And it said, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path." That was probably going to work for me if I just followed the steps. Bro, I intended to do it. And I haven't done the steps real well. I still see gaps and things I could have done better all through my recovery. I say I've been up and down, off and on, imperfect in so many ways. But I've tried to follow the steps because I believed. In fact, I've followed the whole path because I believed that I'd get sober if I did. And that was important, to believe I could change that miserable life I've been living. It was so important to me. And another thing that stood out to me, I may not quote this exactly right, says the idea that we are like or presently may become like other men or other people has to be smashed. I like that word, smashed. If you've got a vase here and it falls off and cracks in a dozen pieces, you know, you get a little epoxy and you're careful enough, you might be able to put that back together again. But if you take it out and set it on a stump and you get a big heavy hammer and smash that booger, it ain't coming back. And that's what I need to do with my alcoholism. I can't be like other people. I can't have that first drink. And I've heard some good stories too. And you know, if you go to meetings long enough, you'll hear people who've been sober 20, 25 years. One fellow 28 years. And he decided he was like other people. And you know, go to meetings. Whatever you hear in a meeting, you'll sooner or later you'll need it. You'll need to be thinking about it. And then the one I had problem with, because I had just about got to the place I didn't believe anything anymore. I quit going to church, quit praying, quit having any kind of spiritual connection whatsoever. But the other thing that really had a big influence on me says this: lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Well, boy, that put me in my place. I had tried to stay sober. I had tried to quit. I had tried to cut down. I had tried to do all of those things without success. So I needed a power greater than me. And I went about trying to find that power. Now, let me say something about that. I never found the theology that I thought I had before I started drinking so badly. Back then, I had a pretty set theology and belief and stuff like that. You need to believe this, and you need to do this, and I guess I believe that. I must have most of it anyway. But I've never found that. Theological system that I believe so strongly in. I believe in God. I believe in this program that the people in here have God among us. I really do. We were having a discussion the other day in a group, and it just occurred to me, could people 3 years sober have done this, written this big book and these steps without a higher power? I don't think so. Some of the best psychological minds and behaviorists and everything else have tried to come up with a work this good, but I don't think they ever have. I think most of this was inspired by God. Well, I don't think we had a prophet that said, you shall do this and you won't do that. But I really think this whole thing is put back. I've never seen a bunch of people. I belong to other organizations in my life. I've never seen a group of people get along as well as recovering alcoholics do. We're not critical of each other. We're accepting. We were talking while I come up, people with very different ideas about what's right and wrong in life. What the government should be, what the church should be, how the school should be run. Very different people can get together in here and should be able to work with somebody that they disagree 100% with to help them get sober and to help them stay sober. Well, everything turned to roses as soon as I got here. Not really. I had so badly abused that marriage that after 9 months, my wife moved out. And at that time, I didn't chase her. I had a sponsor by that time, and he said, Joe, she needs to work out her things, and you can't help her. And he was right. And so I lived alone for the next 8 years. And I gave up some of the things that I was doing wrong, maybe not all of them altogether. But after 8 years, but I did well as far as work was concerned. I finished college. I got a promotion, well, 2 promotions that I never thought I would have been able to get. And one of them took me to Fort Benning, Georgia, in Columbus, Georgia, and I lived there and have a lot of friends there today. But I came back to Fayetteville when I retired from civil service, and found different kinds of work here. Met somebody, and I think we were manipulated a little bit, although I do have very, very strong feelings for her. But she was younger than I am, and after a while, it took its toll. If you can't listen to the same music together, it's not easy. But anyway, she's a good person, and she's in recovery, and I wish her well. I see her from time to time. We have lunch together at times, and my wife knows about it. But it lasted 14 years. That's pretty good for 2 alcoholics. It really is. But I'm now back together with the woman that I originally married. We lost a daughter. She had cancer. Thought it was cured. Came back, and we lost her 10 years ago. But I'm on good terms with my wife. She knows I love her. And the 2 boys, I've got 3 grandchildren that have never seen me drink. Don't even believe it when their daddies tell them about it. But I know I have a good relationship with her, with all of them. One boy just graduated this spring from East Carolina. My oldest boy is an engineer with the Corps of Engineers. and the other boy is an big IT job with the government. And I have just hundreds of friends in AA. I've got them in Columbus, Georgia, and to meetings I went to in all around Chester, Virginia, because I got people up there. And life has been good for me. I'm worried about my wife now. She's had to have pretty serious surgery up at Duke last week. And she, all the indications are that she's doing fine, but I hate to see her not feeling well, and she doesn't. No, she got a good friend to stay with her tonight while I came up here. But I'm a human being again. I used to work for a lady, and she had an accent. Well, it was from, I think, Kentucky, but anyway, she had an accent that was uniquely hers. And she said, her daughter told her one day, she said, as she's growing up, she said, "Mama, I'm not a bean." And she said, "Well, of course you're not a bean. What makes you think that?" She said, "You told me all my life I was a human being." Well, I'm a human being again. And I don't have to have a drink. I haven't wanted one in a long time. But I care for people that do drink. I spend some time from time to time with somebody that's still suffering from alcoholism. And I think that's a blessing that God lets me do that. And God lets me work with them and talk with them and pray with them and escort them to meetings sometime and introduce them around and tell them to call me anytime you want to. Life is in sobriety is very good for me. And I am tremendously grateful for the opportunity that I've had not only to meet you, but all these other people. And I don't think I can make it till 5 minutes up. But I do thank you for letting me come here tonight and see some of you again. I haven't seen in a long time. And I think I'm going to try to get up here a little more often. I used to come to Aberdeen every once in a while to meetings over there. I guess they still have them, I mean, yeah. And maybe you'll let me come in here and have a good cup of coffee with you guys. And I thank you very much.